A purple mountain majesties over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned our good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood.
Afternoon, it's about 3:25 Eastern time. And as we're taping, we're just watching the destruction from Paris. And it's kind of a sad sight. How are you tonight, Liz? Sorry for the bad day too.
No, it's such a downer. I thought we were going to start with how bad it is because it's tax day, but this is tragic, and the pictures are stunning. And as of 10 minutes ago, there were over 400 firefighters on the scene, and that clearly isn't even going to begin to be enough to take care of this devastation. But I just ache for the people of Paris and for the entire country of France, just because of what they've really experienced over the last couple of years. But symbolically, this is just a new blow in every way.
It is, But I think at this point, I mean, as of our taping time, the big question is do the walls hold? And I think people will know that by tonight when this airs, and we pray that they do hold. If they hold, I mean, either way, I think this is going to be rebuilt, and UNESCO has already weighed in and said that they're prepared to help do a rebuild. But it's just awful.
No, and you were, I was there about 18 months ago. It was actually my first time there. It was my husband Joel had been there many times, and it was magnificent. But you were just there very recent. Wasn't it last Easter? Was it this time last year? Exactly?
Yeah, I was there exactly a year ago. I mean, or April 1st through 6th, I just noticed. And we actually stayed at a place right across from from Notre Dame. And so it was a little duplex apartment. And when you open the window to where my daughter stayed, it looked out on that tower, that the spire, which is now gone, sadly. And I emailed. It was an Airbnb, and I emailed the host maybe 40 minutes ago, and he wrote right back and said that it's terrible. He's there watching it, and apparently there's a lot of unhappiness with the government administration, how it's handled. I guess it's a difficult fire to get to, so that's probably a time for pointing fingers later. But just a terrible tragedy. I keep thinking, about the things that were inside there. A couple questions. I wonder, like, how much wood could there be in there? But I guess there is. But all those, there's all those little vestibules. I'm not sure what they're called in the Catholic Church. I should know that. But there's so many little altars around the church that are just that have 1,000-year-old artifacts, and tapestries and mosaics and bone fragments of saints and.
Well, somebody commented earlier that he just had to turn off his TV because it was like watching someone go through the Louvre with a sledgehammer and just smash everything to bits. And so you're so right. I mean, the exterior is beautiful, but what's inside is irreplaceable, just irreplaceable. You can always rebuild a structure, but the centuries of artifacts and religious artifacts, just again, we'll never be able to duplicate them or replicate them. I can't imagine how many people around the world are watching this video from there.
Yeah, and you get the sense. I mean, there's so, the whole world, the West. I mean, the whole world has been hit so hard in recent years with tragedies and with technological upheavals and job losses and revolutions and all that kind of stuff. And it just, just to see Notre Dame burning is it goes right to the psyche. And you don't have to be Christian to feel that way. I think I don't think you have to. And I think everyone who sees that burning today or tonight and feels terribly about it around the world, regardless of religion, those are the people that can rebuild the world. The ones that anyone smiling about it can go to hell.
Yeah. No, who could root against this? I watching the spire fall. I don't know if you saw that in real time. It's just it's like a slow motion. Armageddon or something right out of the movies, the apocalypse. I think feeling so completely helpless here. It's not like, social uprising or something where you can relate to it or feel like this is, you just watch and think, oh my God. Yeah, and you're right. There'll be plenty of recriminations about the government's response, and maybe justifiably. But I think the real point here is just people watching it, having their own personal, either visited it, seen it, or just knowing what it stands for. And as I said earlier, is it my imagination, or has Paris suffered a disproportionate share of sadness and tragedy over the last couple of years?
I think it has. I mean, it's had so many, terrorist incidents, and of course, there's always protests in Paris. I mean, the French are passionate people; they're very political people, and there's always a strike or something going on. But it seems like they've had, certainly more than their share. I don't think any question about that. It's funny. This seems to be one of those things. I remember during 9/11 that day, I walked out. It was, if you remember, it was primary day in New York. And I walked out. I was going to a friend's apartment to see, because he worked in the North Tower, to see if he had made it out. And if he made it out, he would have walked up to his apartment, which is probably a 3 or 4 mile walk. But that was the only way to know whether he made it, because all this, the mobile phones were down. And I remember getting a call from a reporter who was very annoyed because it was primary day. And she says, wait, are they going to actually cancel the primary? And the reason I bring that up is that sometimes these big events or big, symbolic events like this, or you can't get your arms around them until there's distance and time. You don't know how big it is to a culture or to a people until you have time to digest it. I don't think France has digested this one, or anybody. It's it's ongoing.
Yes, it is ongoing. I don't know if there's been any other reaction from people around Europe. Is there anything substantively that outsiders can offer here, do you think, Billy?
I would imagine it's going to be donations. I know UNESCO says that they're going to kick in, but I imagine donations would be the main thing. And that's, and what I mean by, like, when I said, like, getting perspective, like, there'll be a time where, was that before the fire or after the fire? It may end up being one of those iconic moments in French history. But I was just watching Chris Cuomo is doing a very good job on CNN with this. And, they were talking about, they'll likely rebuild, but, it may be a generation or two before they can do it, before they can finish it. It's going to be, it's like painstaking. I remember seeing a couple of years ago, I was in Italy and saw Monte Cassino, which was bombed to dust by the Americans and the British in World War II. And that was put back together, and they're still working on that. It's now magnificent. They're still working on that, 75, 6 years later.
Oh my Lord. Well, as you say, we're taping. I don't know if we're going to find out later on if there was any other cause here other than, something that went, some malfunction with the renovation work that's being, that's been underway there for a while. But do you think in situations like this, the response is affected by or influenced by the cause? And by that, I mean, is there outrage if it's deliberate, if it's arson, it's terrorism, or is there a different level of sympathy if it's some fluke, horrible accident like this?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a totally different response. You tend to understand things by how they end a little bit, and how they conclude, I guess, is a better way to put it. And if there was something, it'll be viewed completely differently. I know that they're saying there was work going on. That's the most hopeful, possibility, that there was an electrical thing or something, and then you could, they'll go through the lawsuits and this one, whatever it might be. But if it was an arson or something like that, it's a whole different story. And then if it's a political motivation, and we're way out ahead of ourselves, then that's something else still, where then you have to respond, and it's, you get into this whole mess. But
what about all the unrest with the yellow vests? And I sort of died down a bit lately, although I think last weekend there was another, I guess, mini, it's not even an uprising, demonstration. But I think the whole city's got to be on edge and also exhausted. It's just emotionally exhausted. Yeah.
Yep. And it's probably to go into the night because there's only so much water they can put on the thing because of the where it's situated on an island and but with a pretty good distance from the river to to the church itself, and so you can only shoot so much water. So it's probably going to burn for a long, long time into the night, and people will, of course, gather. But that's, it's just, wow. I mean, just, it's like the world without a Notre Dame,
Yeah.
That's, that's like, I didn't realize that was the number one tourist, visitation site in all of Europe. And the fourth.
I did not know.
And more than the Vatican, according to what I heard on television. Someone may need to fact check that, but that's what they're reporting. And the fourth most visited site on Earth. So it's, between 12 and 14 million visitors a year. And I got to go to Mass to it last year, which really makes me happy that I got that opportunity.
For Easter, on Easter Sunday?
No, we had a little delay or something, so we couldn't go on Easter Sunday, but we went a couple of days later. We went to see the cathedral, and there was a Mass, and we went there and a Mass broke out. And so I sat down there, and my daughter kind of walked around the church. I kept trying to get over here and sit down, one of those things, because I wanted her to be able to say that she was at Mass at Notre Dame. And she was she probably wanted to shoot spitballs at me from behind the poles, but she was there for it. And it was, it's obviously quite special. I mean, everything about that place. And, one of the great things in the world. I guess we'll know more by the time this airs tonight.
Yes, and just to see if there was anything salvageable at all. Good God.
Yeah, I think for the way they're talking about it, if the walls don't collapse, then it makes the rebuilding a lot easier. And there's been fires there before over history. I was looking at some of the history. I mean, Henry VI, became a king there. I forgot the term for that. Napoleon, the first. Just amazing stuff that occurred in that church. And I don't know how many people are buried there. I hope that this doesn't affect that. I don't know if Notre Dame is one of the churches, I can't remember, that has popes and the rest of them buried beneath. But maybe it's far enough beneath, or maybe that wasn't one of the central places for that. But I suspect it is.
Oh gosh! Well, like you said, we'll learn a lot every hour. Good heavens!
But they're rebuilt. The French will rebuild. I mean, the world rebuilds. It does. It's got resilience.
Yeah, well, good. We have look no further than the World Trade Center to know that.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's been any has been any coverage about fatalities or casualties or injured.
Not yet. None whatsoever, which is interesting. I think the news would have moved a little more quickly here, but there's nothing at all about that. But it seems as though it seemed the consensus among the broadcasters that I saw was that there's probably, and again, this is going to be, we're taping 5.5 hours early, so I may be proved wrong, but there's probably not a big human disaster. There's probably not a lot of fatalities. It was more the physical and the spiritual and the cultural, really. But hey, maybe it's something that helps bring the world together. Maybe Muslim nations and Jews from around the world and others will contribute money, and I'm sure they will. And and that's kind of what the world needs. So
Yep, that is what happens.
The world works in mysterious ways.
That's so true. It's so true. Well, speaking of bringing the world together, you're in Washington, and I'm about to join you there tomorrow. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. What have I got you into now, huh?
Whenever I hear panel discussion, I raise my hand.
I can't help it. It's actually a conference scheduled that's sponsored by two organizations. One is called SAPRAC, which is it's an American organization. It's Saudi Americans, and the Saudi American Public Relations Affairs Committee, and they're working with a magazine out of Riyadh that's pan Arabic, and it's called About Her, and it's I went last year to the event and was able to moderate one of the panels, and it's a lot of young women from all over the world, but particularly from the Arab region, that are getting new freedoms, and they're taking full advantage of them, and and history is changing everywhere, including in that region of the world. And they're coming and talking about it. I was struck last year by just how together and confident everybody was. It was really cool to see.
And the audience is from all over?
The audience is from all over, but mostly from the Arab world. and there'll be a lot of press from that region. There's press from the U.S. also there last year. I think Washington Post and Bloomberg and a bunch of others were there. But it's a pretty cool thing. I moderated the panel, and it was young women. They were young professionals, and these were Saudi women, and they just, in Saudi Arabia they're just able to drive. There's some new things that have broken through. This was pre-Khashoggi, so things were a lot rosier at the time. And I said, are there certain industries that you think will be good opportunities for women? And one of the young women snapped at me and said, there are no industries we can't be leaders in. You know what I mean? She hit back at me. And I was like, how could I have walked into that one? It's something I'd walk into with my daughters. But really, it's really pretty impressive. And it's just about bringing business and culture. They want to bring business there, here, all over the world. And, this is the world getting smaller, and it's technology and it's cheaper travel and the rest of it. But it's having an impact everywhere. The magazine, by the way, and I don't know that much about it yet, but About Her is apparently very, very popular in the Arab world, and they're looking to do some work in the United States and maybe get some columnists here to track both U.S. culture and Arabic culture and just share information back and forth.
Yeah, I did take a look at the magazine. It's got a great combination of as you said, culture, fashion, and then politics and policy, and some that's unique to the region, but also global. So for people who are interested, you can go on the abouther.com website and check it out. And Billy, maybe you can share. I guess if you're hosting the panel, you can't live tweet, but we'll get back to everyone next week to talk about what this was about. And I'm so curious to see how they feel about the Trump administration and how what's gone on and leaders like Ivanka Trump, the stuff that she's been doing for business, particularly small businesses worldwide, if that's helped their initiative at all or added any extra juice to it, and all of the above. Yeah, no,
it'll be interesting. Yeah, exactly. And it's it's funny. I was always fascinated by politics, as you know, and I know you are as well. And just at a very young age, it just I had an ear out for it. But the older I get, the more I realize how much I missed. It's really the most important things in the world, the most the most impactful are cultural. It's not political. Political is just the short-term stuff. It's the cultural stuff that really shapes a world and rocks a world, which is why I think so many people are unsettled right now, is that our culture is changing demographically, technologically. Religions are falling or falling on hard times, certainly. All these things are happening at once. And it's the politics, is just the tail of the dog. The culture is much bigger. So I'm beginning to appreciate at age 55, finally, the cultural stuff coming from around the world and the shared culture, because it's so much easier to share it now. It's right there, at the push of a button.
Well, it's such a great point, and it applies everywhere. The politics lag behind the cultural change, and often these politicians are the last to figure out what's been brewing locally, and by locally I mean culturally, for a long time. They wake up to it often not until they're at the ballot box, and they realize, God, am I out of this? Is about being out of touch is often very much about cultural change, very much.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, and you're right. The politics are a trailing indicator, and I think the wild politics in America are the trailing indicator. We've, other people have talked about this ad nauseum. I'm just a little bit late to the game. I've just been thinking about it all day. We had a couple of press meetings this morning, and that subject came up, and it's just on my mind. And then watching Notre Dame burning, it just kind of brought it home. Just these things that I always took for granted. These things that I just assumed were foundational in America. They start to crumble over time, or they get threatened, and that comes with a reaction.
Yeah, it does come with a reaction.
Speaking of reaction, what's your reaction, Liz, to news of Bernie Sanders now leading in the polls?
I don't know
if that could be a segue.
I love it.
But I think he's a reaction to what's going on. It's people just jerking left and right.
Well, he's at the top. Joe Biden is second, and Pete Buttigieg is third. Isn't that right?
Yes.
That's the last. This is in Iowa, anyway. Am I surprised? Yes, I am. I am. But I also don't read too much into them, and I don't know how lasting this is going to be. And we still haven't gotten our official announcement from Biden. I'm sure Sanders is the most threatened by that. I think Pete Buttigieg is in his own category, largely for obvious reasons. He's generationally represents a whole new perspective and voice. Biden and Sanders can easily draw from, even though they were actually nothing alike as politicians or as leaders, but they could be drawing from the same pool here. I don't know if you saw Gillibrand's fundraising numbers. She released those yesterday. And in the first quarter, she only raised $3 million, which was at the bottom of the pack of the Democratic primary candidates. She still has over $10 million on hand because she didn't have to spend any money in her own Senate race here in New York. So she's got a war chest here. But she's blaming it, and her staff is blaming that on her Al Franken position. So that's interesting. They're openly blaming that, and they're trying to spin it as a positive that no matter what.
I just, Liz, I just imagine the two of us in a campaign bunker room when the numbers come in saying, so where do we go with this? There's got to be a positive here somewhere.
Who do we blame for this? Let's blame Al Franken.
I'm such an advocate for women that it's cost me money,
That's what I'm saying. And no matter what, I won't compromise my principles. And I actually always wonder who thinks it's a good idea to actually blame a dumb electorate. What they're saying is, are the voters here and the donors, not the voters, the donors are too dumb or too shallow to respect how noble I am, is sort of her message here. And that no matter what, I would have taken that position, and I'd take it again if I had to, because I'll never back down when it comes to protecting women. It's just not working. It's not working.
I got to say, it almost hurts me to watch some of these candidates get in there. And Gillibrand is one, and Bill de Blasio is another. And I like de Blasio personally. He's a nice guy. But you watch them, here I am, and the world is saying you ain't all that. And that's a really tough thing. When you're really out there as a candidate, that's got to be really tough to swallow, especially when you're, Kirsten Gillibrand is a U.S. senator, and she's been reelected twice, and Bill de Blasio is mayor of the biggest city in America. And just to have virtually no reaction, like not a ripple out there, nobody cares about them. That's got to be tough. That's got to be hard.
Well, you and I have talked about the New York City thing a lot. I don't think the rest of the world is waiting to be just like New York.
No, nor should they be. Yeah,
that's exactly right. They think of a lot of bad things: high taxes, crime, it's crowded, congestion,
rude people.
Even though it's worse, but they're not looking to run the country the way New York City is run. So I don't know what his platform would be. But in her case, as we've said many times, her rise to the role of U.S. Senator was fairly unlikely, and she got very lucky. And she's also skated one lane for her entire tenure, which is women's sexual that it's all about being a mom as a senator and women. And you got to do better. You got to do better.
Yeah. And of course, when her own party had sexual harassment scandals in Albany, in our state capital in New York, she was utterly silent. I mean, nothing at all. And you can't forget that. You can't forget that. And it's hard to do. It's hard to speak out against your own party, but she did not do that. She did it with Al Franken, but maybe because she was criticized in New York, or maybe she was trying to get rid of a competitor in 2020. Perhaps maybe some of these candidates are really looking for a VP slot, but I just don't know what she adds or what he adds. I mean, he has executive experience, but that's you're right. I don't think New York, the New Yorkers are the most popular people in the country.
No, and I don't know what his name ID is around the country, but I think it's probably exceedingly low. I bet hers is higher than his.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you see, by the way? Kamala Harris was asked the other day if she considers herself an Obama Democrat. No, did you hear this? Did you?
I don't think so.
It was great. She was asked by a reporter, "Do you call yourself an Obama Democrat?" And she said, "I call myself Kamala." And I thought that was such a great line. this idea that we were pigeonholing all these people. Are you a Reagan Republican? Would you say you're a Trotsky? We ask, she just went right for it, and it was, I don't know if she had rehearsed it, but she seems to be doing all the right things. We've talked about this a lot, but she's raising the money. She's serious on the issues. She's a kind of joyful warrior out there. It's just very appealing about her. She gets away with being just as angry as Elizabeth Warren, but she doesn't look it.
Right. And presumably she should be in a good position to win the California primary on March 3rd. And she could come out of that going into the next round of primaries, which is there's some big ones after that, New York and Massachusetts and others. She could come out of that with a huge ball of momentum. And so, I think you've said watch her since the beginning. So I listened to you and started watching her, and she's kind of, if you ever go to a horse race, you look at the pack. I'm always looking 3 or 4 back, and because one of those is going to find that lane in the stretch, and she's certainly in that territory. There's no question. And at the end of the day, Biden and Bernie, both white guys, old white guys, and I hate to play into that stereotype, but they are. And there's a lot of the electorate that wants a woman and they want a minority, and she's both. And she's also not worrisome on crime and that type of thing, because she was an attorney general. So yeah, I think she's in a very nice spot. But she's disappeared for a while from the press. She popped up here and there. But you do the flavor of the month thing where they're chasing all the new candidates and asking that question. Are you a Bobby Kennedy Democrat? Are you an Obama Democrat? They always try to get pigeonholed, and whoever runs for office should remember to answer exactly like she did. I'm a John Smith Republican.
Obama Democrat. I call myself Kamala. I lie is always perfect.
Yeah, it is perfect. Yeah.
And she laughed, which was exactly, again, the way to do it.
The Bernie thing. I need to do a column later today, and I keep the thing that keeps going through my head is that the American people are being unserious right now. I mean, with the fiscal problems that we have, how could you possibly consider Bernie Sanders for president? I mean, you have to be unserious.
Yeah, even Pete Buttigieg is against free tuition for all. That's not doable. Medicare for all.
Yeah, he said it was no. He said debt-free college. I'm not sure what that means, but it's, I guess he's found some distinction.
No, I think you're right about the seriousness. And do you think that that's the case because people think the president's not serious, so that this whole thing is just a big lark? I actually think the president's deadly serious about a lot of
things. I think he is. It's just, you get that reaction. You know what I mean? You get when you have somebody, and I'm not hanging the Democrats on Trump, under any sense. I mean, they're responsible for their own positions. But when you have something happen, you get that equal and opposite reaction. And Trump is going in there and changing a lot of norms, and in a lot of ways dangerously, with taking, with usurping legislative power. And the legislature, the Congress seems to be giving it away too freely in my book. But, he's such a radioactive figure, or, a lightning bolt, that the Democrats, right, they're just trying to be as outrageous with positions and the rest of it. And when Democrats are outrageous, they're expensive. Republicans are outrageous. They can do, X, Y, and Z, but with the Democrats, it always comes with a huge price tag, and they're in the trillions, It was Elizabeth Warren was $11 trillion she spent in one afternoon, I think, one town hall.
Yeah, it's true. Although, we've discussed this. When we beat up on the Republicans pretty hard, is because they deserve it. I mean, they are hypocrites on this stuff. The Democrats they don't pretend to be anything other than big spenders. Paul Ryan did a damn good job of running up the deficit and the debt.
Isn't it incredible? Paul Ryan, he was my fifth-grade hero. I had all my hopes in him.
Yeah, a lot of people did. So that it's hard for them to the Republicans cannot claim that probably for a long time. That mantle of fiscal responsibility gets. At the state level, they can if they're running for governor, but no.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a Democrat last week who put in a bill for a balanced budget amendment, which I thought was very interesting. And maybe it's just a political ploy, but I think it was a good tweak to Republicans saying, "Remember when you were like this?"
Sure.
And you know who spoke so well? I got to meet Jeff Flake on last Thursday night. I had dinner with him and a few people in New Haven, Connecticut. He was speaking up at Yale, and just couldn't have been a nicer guy. I know there's some Republicans who don't like him. I love the guy. He really couldn't have been nicer or brighter, and he talked a lot about the debt and in his remarks. And when you have somebody really focusing on the biggest crisis before the nation, and it's a crisis incoming and a crisis just as it exists now, to be really thundered out of the party is a real shame, I think. And I hope the Republicans either get serious about that again, or someone gets in that is going to force the issue.
Yeah, I don't even hear any Republicans talking about it. None.
No, I got to say my guys at the Federalist Party of America are doing a great job with that. They're every day they're out there, hitting that on social media with whatever with whatever tools they have, and it's a low budget, but you can't let that conversation go. I mean, we talked about that a bunch of times. It's every day when we wake up and then go to bed, there's billions more that have been added to the kid's credit card.
Billy, do you think that Republican voters will hold the president responsible for this at all, or punish him at all at the polls in 2020, or that this is just not going to be an issue?
I don't think it's going to be an issue. Because it's nobody has any, like, nobody's going to lean in on it. I hate that term, but it's like the Republicans could use the issue against the Democrats because of the Democrats are proposing such fantastically expensive programs, and so Republicans will be right to attack that, but their track record has been so bad these last 3 years, or really the last 15 years. But under this, current administration, that they're going to pay a price for bringing it up, because they've been terrible. They've been worse to some extent than even President Obama was.
Yes, they really have.
I mean, we were $5 trillion before George Bush came in, George W. Bush, and that was like 10 seconds ago, and then 5 went to 10, and then 10 went to 20, and then 20 went to, what are we now, 23? I mean, just wow. And of course it's compounded, so the numbers move faster the bigger they get.
And I know I keep bringing this up, but I haven't seen any indication that Republicans are going to raise the idea of entitlement reform. I haven't seen any bold ideas on any fiscal issues.
Yeah, that seems to be an issue that's only still discussed among what you would call never Trump Republicans or conservatives. That
like
what I mean? Yeah. I mean, it's we're still talking about those same issues, and they're not going away. And it seems like an inconvenient conversation for those in Washington right now. And I appreciate the position that the Republicans in Washington are in. And they're dealing with a volatile president. And there's some things that Trump has done well, no question. And there's some things he'll continue to do well. But, they're just not raising that one. They're not bringing it up because they know it's not going to happen. And he didn't say it was going to happen. He didn't say he was going to reduce the debt. That was never a talking point, unless he decides to make it a major pillar and then does something about it. But, the budget he just put in is the biggest in history. And it's massive. It's over $4 trillion.
Yeah, I don't see any indication that he's going to lead on this at all. And as we have also discussed, he did apologize. He said it's the only time that I think I've seen him in his administration say he regretted something, and that was his vote on the omnibus bill. So I think if he's pushed, he'll blame Congress and say he was forced and he regrets it. And as if anyone's ever forced him to do anything. But that's his position.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, I haven't seen anything. He proposed plenty of his own initiatives that are very expensive, starting with the wall.
I know the worst. I know the worst you can. Oh, sorry, Liz, I lost you there for a second.
I'm saying, I'm not saying I'm opposed to the wall, because I'm not. I'm just saying the fiscal note, the notion of a fiscal note attached to any of these initiatives is long gone. I haven't heard anyone talk about that in years. Not just this president.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And same thing. I mean, I support a wall. I don't know if you need it in every location, but you got to have that and a change of policy. I was about to say that, I'm always told that the worst way to cut spending in government is to do a unilateral cut across all agencies. Like it's like that's the cheapest way to do it. But it's like I think that's what we'd have to do. Like a 7% cut across the board. You know what I mean? Some number, and just deal with it. Just deal with it. Because
well, and I agree with you, but that's not my idea of long-term planning. But certainly triage, and it also then takes the whole idea here of sacred cows off the table. Because everything is a sacred cow when you start getting into who should be cut by 5 or 10% or 7. Who should you say it to everyone and I don't want to hear it? You slam the door like your kids, and that's what it is.
Yeah. No, that's right. Hey, Liz, what do you think about the Tiger Woods thing? That was pretty interesting.
Magnificent, and I watched it. I don't watch golf that often. I don't know if you do, but I loved every minute of it. I watched the last hour, and then of course the victory stuff, and I couldn't help but feel it. And I thought what was one of the things I loved so much was the reaction from everyone, out of the woodwork, just saying this is just so to see this story. And no one was saying redemption, but it certainly was, especially and physically, because he's been through hell with ailments and back problems and other problems, and then obviously his personal troubles. And so I know, and everyone loves these comeback stories, but the world of golf specifically was really gracious. And I think I didn't see anyone who wasn't thrilled to see him win. And obviously the picture with his son being the keeper and his daughter.
Yeah, I kind of missed it. I was I saw that he was, I guess on Saturday I saw that he was a couple of strokes back. And it was on. I was at someone's house, and his mother had it on, and then I didn't follow it. I assumed he was going to fall a couple of holes behind in the end, and then I heard it on the way down to Washington on the radio, and it was like, yeah, you're right. People were really lighting up, which was nice.
They were. I of course obsessing about the Mets already.
Of course, you can't even talk about it.
It's only April, and I'm standing on pins and needles every night. I got to learn.
Oh, I know, and with for Met fans, you see DeGrom coming up, and you put a W in your column before the game starts, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
No, that's exact. It's so true. Are you watching regularly, or will you?
I will be. Like I started listening to it on Amazon on radio. So that's what I'll do. I'll be reading or something like that, and I'll just pop the Met game on in the back. But I check the score every day, and I'll watch a little bit. But I love to listen to baseball on radio. I think it's one of the great American pastimes. Is just to sit in the backyard and have the radio going or something. Life is good.
Exactly. Baseball is sports I think that really works as well, if not better, on radio as it does on TV. I think a lot of these other sports are really tough on the radio, but baseball, you get it. You get so into it. Good radio announcer. Right.
So, Liz, I guess it looks like the Mueller report will be on Thursday. Do you expect anything dramatic from that?
I was going to ask you if you think it's going to matter. I think the spin will be the spin, and as it's always been. I saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday, basically still saying it's exoneration. So I guess from a public relations standpoint, I don't know that there's anything that's going to happen that's going to change anyone's mind. It's like everything else with Trump. People are very dug in on one side or the other. And clearly, if there were anything legal that needed to be done, it would have been handled.
Oh.
Don't you think?
Oh.
It would have come out. That's that. No one cares. You know what? The president doesn't care what people say about Barr. Barr doesn't care what people say about Barr. And I'm sure that, of course, Trump's opponents are going to pick apart every syllable. But I don't see any big ball drop.
No, I don't think so. I think it's pretty much done. I think there'll be enough in there to keep Democrats on the hunt on the Trump stuff, but I think that's to their detriment. I think they got to be, they need something more, obviously. But if no one else is going to jail and no one's getting impeached, it's done. And I think there's going to be bad behavior that's going to come out. And I continue to think that they were playing footsie with the Russians, in a number of ways. But if there's no, criminal evidence, then that's it.
Yeah. That is it. I think that's exactly right. And these guys are crazy if they are, by these guys, I mean, in particular, the Democratic primary candidates, if this is what they're going to talk about. And I'll tell you, Nancy Pelosi's making a big mistake. If this is her focus for the next 18 months, too, they're going to have to get something done.
I didn't, but I saw the clip. Did you see that?
watched her. I did watch her. And she is no shortage of confidence there, and she's very effective in her, in her delivery and her points. But she's insisting. Leslie Stahl actually pressed her and said, "You guys have gotten nothing done." And Nancy Pelosi pushed back hard and said, "Well, I just got here 3 months ago, and stand by. Now that I'm the speaker, I'll get it all done." And Leslie Stahl said, "No, you guys have for 2 years been in Congress, and there's just no one around the country feels like you have or will get anything done." And she said, "Well, we've always had common ground on immigration and on infrastructure, and it's bipartisan." And Leslie Stahl said, "Yeah, but you still haven't gotten anything done." So my big point here is, to spend the next 18 months talking about Mueller and not getting anything done, I don't see how that advances the Democrats' cause at all.
No, I think that's right. Do you think, and it's something I wonder about, I ask myself, is the infrastructure spending, it's the one thing they could probably agree on. The Republicans would do it reluctantly because it'll drive the debt that much higher, and Democrats seem to love to spend money regardless of debt. I guess you could say the same thing about Republicans now. But do you think it's worth going that much deeper into debt? Like, putting one figure was $3 trillion to put in. Do you think the return on that investment is worth it in the long run?
I think there need to be some offsets. First of all, I think any spending on infrastructure, I shouldn't say this, that's the wrong thing. I think spending on infrastructure should be a priority, if not the priority. I think if you don't spend it now, you're going to spend twice as much later. You learn this even at you learn this with your own house, right? Patch the roof, patch the roof, patch the roof. No, right. Replace the roof. The same thing magnified exponentially. And I think the lack of planning here across the board on infrastructure has cost us an incalculable amount of money. So I'm all for the spending frankly, I see it as both a public safety and national security issue. It's certainly good for the economy and for jobs. But in the short term, we are so low, we have no money, there has to be some give. There just has to be. What I haven't examined closely, maybe you can enlighten me here, is what part of the Green New Deal includes infrastructure spending and on what? Or is that just
it's a throwaway. I read it and I don't recall all the details of it, but it was more set up. I mean, first of all, it was absurd. It was so political, and it just read like a socialist manifesto. But it was more benchmarks. We'll get rid of all this by this date. We'll outlaw carbon and stop car travel, and it was no detail really. It wasn't so much. There was no specificity at all of we're going to put $16 billion into Amtrak, or we're going to do light rail here, or that kind of stuff. That didn't exist, But the public transportation system in the country, maybe not everywhere, but certainly the Northeast it's so dilapidated. And you're right. We're always putting the Band-Aid on. It's always fix the technology, which is from the 1920s or 30s. And sometimes they're actually in New York City, of course, they make parts, they machine parts because they stopped making those parts 70 years ago. I mean, the stuff is from the early the turn of the 20th century, and so to rip it all out and redo it is just too much money. So they machine old parts, and I think God help me for saying it, but I think it's the investment, will pay off. There have to be offsets, no question, and maybe public-private. No, but we're falling so far behind the rest of the world that it's not just embarrassing. It hurts us economically.
It does. It absolutely. Like I said, for me, it's.
Oh, sorry.
National security and our economy. It's so, yeah. But are they even, by they, I mean the Congress and the administration together working on an infrastructure plan? And who's leading it?
Yeah, there must be somebody in the basement of one of the buildings working on it, I would think, identifying projects. And that was the real shame, I thought, when we did when President Obama did the, what was it called? That $1 trillion plan when the economy was collapsing. there was a term for it. It starts with an R, I think. The Recovery Act, right? Exactly, the Recovery Act. That there weren't enough projects that were shovel ready. Like the plenty hadn't been done, and that was money that should have all gone into infrastructure, and it would have had probably more impact. And I think a lot of it did go into infrastructure, but projects weren't ready to go. You could have, if they were ready, if the planning was there, or at least people were moving towards the planning, you could have gotten a bigger bang for the buck. But there has to be. I pray that somebody has a list. Actually, a list does exist of the infrastructure needs in priority. I forgot. I saw that a number of years ago, where they had the U.S. priority. I think it was done by maybe some of the trade unions that fix that stuff.
And Mike Bloomberg was always a leader on this for sure. I had a lot of issues with the stimulus package, and you could argue that it certainly helped save us from, death and destruction to a degree. But again, I don't know if you remember this, but the criteria for getting money were projects that were shovel ready. Well, really, the Tappan Zee Bridge project was not going to be shovel ready in 8 months. So they funded this nickel and dime stuff, road paving, and never mind some of the waste and other stuff. But who's got the big plan to do the water, our entire water supply? All the pipes, the water tanks, the bridges, the schools. Yeah, I think you're right. Mike Bloomberg had been a leader on this, but I haven't seen the master list in a while.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to go back to the debt for a second, that's where the debt's really going to cost us. Is when it comes time to borrow those type of dollars for municipalities and states, no one's going to lend. And we're getting to the point where they're not going to lend anymore. They just can't. They can't give us any more debt. And then what happens? That's a scary thought.
That it is a scary thought. And it's interesting. People always say that one of the reasons that infrastructure projects don't get done is they're just not sexy. Senator Scott
That's right.
putting his name on a water tank. So I don't know. That it's probably true actually, but if that's the case, I maybe it's just too big a subject. Infrastructure. A lot of people don't even know what you're talking about. When you start getting down to business, this is the stuff that makes.
And that's the stuff the government's supposed to do and do well. And I think everybody can agree on that. Right. I know the left thinks that the government should do a lot more, but at least they believe that it should be doing that. And Republicans agree there. And, if it'll be curious to see whether that's what Trump and Pelosi do, which I guess got us on the tangent was Nancy Pelosi. That seems to be the one thing that they could get agreement on.
Yeah. Well, again, if you can't, it's a public safety and national security issue. So our grid, the electrical grid, all of it that's so old and in some cases just not even functioning. But I was actually sort of mistaken. I really thought this would be a priority of the administration. Yeah. And here we are 3 years in and it's not.
And you think of falling behind. I just saw Crazy Rich Asians or a piece of it. My wife and one of my daughters was watching it. And you look at Singapore and or pictures of other Chinese cities, and it's almost cliche to talk about this, how far the U.S. has fallen behind. I have a friend in from the Philippines, a guy I grew up with, and we had a bit of a reunion on Saturday, and he was talking about all the Chinese investment going into the Philippines and going into Africa, and of course the Chinese are floating debt or giving them giving them cheap money. And knowing full well that a lot of these nations are going to default, and then China's going to be able to take land and do the rest of it. But in a world where China is so clearly growing, we seem to be backing off. That's just a scary thing. We talk about cultural changes. That's another one. Where are we? Where are we going? We don't seem to have a clear direction.
We certainly don't. What do you, we can't finish the show today without talking about the president's proposal to relocate detainees who've come in illegally to sanctuary cities. So The New York Times reported that somewhere in the neighborhood of 260,000 people have been detained at the U.S.-Mexico border since October last year alone. So Trump is suggesting that we relocate them and disperse them to sanctuary cities around the country.
I mean, it makes you smile when you first hear it, because I'm not a sanctuary city guy. I don't like the policy. That said, this is sanctuary cities result because, or sanctuary counties for that matter, result because the federal government hasn't done its job, and so they're forced to try and deal with this stuff. In the county I live in, there are tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of undocumented people living, including in my town. I think they probably end up there anyway in those localities because, and others have noted that, but that new immigrants tend to go where they know people and where there are other new immigrants. And so I think that will happen naturally. And that tends to be in areas that are already sanctuary cities. So I don't think it would materially change the outcome, but I think it's good politics on Trump's part. I think it's a good gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, I do.
We met with a columnist in a liberal columnist in Washington today. I won't mention the name because I think it was a private meeting, but who had just gotten back from the border and said there is a crisis there. There is a humanitarian crisis there, no question. And the question is what you do with it. And there's a million practical questions on how you deal with immigration. But there's he said there is a crisis there. It's right before your eyes. It's a massive crisis. And he didn't mean just for the people from Central America, but for North Americans, for U.S. Americans. There's a crisis.
Talking about the influx of drugs and the sex trafficking and that, or was it
too many people? We can't take care of them. It was, what on earth are we going to do with all these people? And again, that cultural change. And some people say, oh, it's white against brown and all that kind of stuff like that. I'm like, stop it. It's just you start to question the rule of law and the basic foundations. And I've seen it change my own school districts and stuff. And you live with it. You know what I mean? You live with it. But it is disruptive. And when you can't enforce your own border laws, that doesn't give you a feeling of confidence in that country. I mean, but it's hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's huge numbers. Per month.
Numbers, yeah. I agree with you that politically for the president, this is, first of all, not a surprise.
It's a winner for him.
And secondly, it's a winner for him. Yeah. What about our not so favorite Congresswoman who called what happened at the World Trade Center something that some people did, quote unquote, and this ongoing battle with her, and this, unfortunately, the religious war that's going on now between well, it's not the Muslim and Jewish communities in politics, but the profiling, frankly.
It does. When criticism first started with her, a couple of months ago, I was always like, I'll give the freshman a break. A little bit in my mind. I didn't say that out loud, but it was like, I'll give her a break. You know what I mean? Now it's like, you've got to be kidding me. To me, she seems clearly anti-Semitic, and she seems to enjoy lighting people up and with pain. She likes the controversy clearly. I think she goes down in their district. Her district is it's Muslim, Jewish, and Christian, and I don't think she's going to survive it. I think she's gone out too far. She's already become a Washington figure right off the bat. You're supposed to take care of your district, not use your position to make international headlines from saying outrageous things. And that seems to be what she's doing.
Well, 100%. And she is, smart as a fox. I think she was talking like this throughout her entire campaign, just doing it in people's living room. And these are not, these are well-chosen words. And by that, I mean on her part. They're not one-off. She's not speak. She's not quoted out of context.
That's right. And she knows how to troll the press and troll the right, and she does it. And I understand that there are many Somalis who are Somali Americans and Somalis who are not too pleased about this. That they wish she would do her job and stop trying to light matches everywhere.
Yeah, it's just, it really doesn't help anyone. I'm not sure who her audience is for this stuff. Really all it is just, and now to turn around and say that her life's threatened and that the response to what she said is actually what's the most dangerous. This is just going to go on and on and on. And
it is. Hey, Liz, I can't believe that this was a very, very quick hour. But I think our hour is up. Our hour is up, yeah.
Well, we'll just be thinking of Paris and thinking of Notre Dame tonight. This is a
That's right.
cathedral that has survived the Nazis. I mean, it survived years of all kinds of threats. And so we have to pray that some of it's not standing, but it's all going to be determined by the time this show is actually on the air. Because firefighters have said within the next hour there should be some very dramatic developments. So we will keep praying for
Well said.
Paris. For everybody.
But anyway, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you, Liz. Always good to talk about. I'll see you tomorrow in Washington. Wonderful. Okay, with bells on. Bye.
He crowned not good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea